and welcome to another Blether Wi Heather with me, Ali Heather. This is the series where we put our lugs to the ground and find out what's happening in the world in the Scots language. This is, very sadly, our final in a wee series of four. They've all been leading up to the morn's Giza Scots Phrase Day. Giza Scots Phrase Day is something that you at home absolutely hate to join in with. Basically, the game is record yourself on your phone saying your favourite Scots phrase or expression. Maybe it's something you use all the time at work. Maybe it's something you can for your granny saying it at home. Record yourself saying it and stick it up online on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram with the hashtag Giza Scots Phrase Day. This helps us all explore in another's dialect. It helps us understand the different ways of Scots being used all around the country, and it helps us access some of that great cultural wisdom that's embedded in our mother tongue. But this evening, I'm delighted to say I'm joined by the excellent Erin Farley for the final guest of the season. Erin is a local history librarian at Dundee Libraries and a traditional storyteller. So please welcome Erin Farley.
Hiya, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me on, Ali.
Absolutely delighted to hear you here. So me and Erin ken each other a wee bit because over the last lockdown we were doing Scots language evening classes together, and it was great crack. And I was delighted to have the chance to invite Erin along here because she was interesting. Erin, let's start at the very beginning. I introduced you as the local history librarian for Dundee Libraries. Yous are just a way to reopen after about 150 year closed, aren't you?
So Dundee Libraries, the Hale Libraries, have been open for a good few weeks now for lending books, computer access, all that sort of thing. But we are hoping that in the next couple of weeks we'll have local history open. It'll be by appointment, I'm afraid, but just get in touch with us, and we're so looking forward to having our regulars back through the doors to start doing their research again.
Smashing, smashing. I've got a dissertation to write over the summer that I haven't even started yet, so maybe I can come down and you can help us out with some interesting
What's
documents.
it about?
Then again, I'll hate to decide.
All right.
So this evening, I advertise it as a bit of a Dundee special because you've made a special research over your kind of career as an academic into vernacular culture of Victorian Dundee. One of the things you've been focusing on, and you're telling us about a wee bit earlier on, is the Broadsides, the streets of Dundee. So tell us first of all what the Broadsides are and what their role in Victorian Dundee was.
So a broadside is just an awfully cheaply printed wee sheet of paper, and it would have the words to a song on it. A song or a poem, or sometimes you even get kind of text ones as well that people would do for sort of funny recitations at events. And it's just like a really flimsy wee sheet of paper. And folk would buy them for just a penny or maybe a halfpenny, and you would use these as a way of learning songs when you were going about performing them. So they're really interesting, and because they're so flimsy and they were so everyday, it's actually they're kind of rare now. Some of them.
So these broadsides, they're sort of a way of accessing. Ken, we can't hear the voices of the working class of Dundee for the 1900s because obviously we didn't have, they weren't recorded in the traditional sense, but we can access their vernacular culture through these sort of ephemeral published sheets. We actually have a couple images that you've sent through for us. Get maybe your first broadside ballad up on the screen, and you can tell us a wee bit what we can learn about working class culture for the time. For this is the Dundee ABC.
So this I love this one because it's so specific, and it's a really great example of how somebody could just come up with an idea, and they could go and get it printed, and then they could hear it to sell it in the streets and the pubs and the music halls. And this is it's by a man called Tom Glenn. Now, I didn't ken much about him. I've tried to find him on sort of censuses and that because he's written a couple of really hilarious songs, but I've not been able to find much about him. There was possibly a van driver with the same name that I'm thinking might have been him. But this is basically he's going through all the streets of Dundee and sort of saying things about them. So he's got the Overgate in there. He's got Fish Street, which is no longer with us. But he's got, O is for the Overgate, where brokers' shops abound. And then as he gets towards the end of the alphabet, he's kind of running out of things that there are in Dundee that begin with these letters. So he's gone for W's for women. God bless them all, say I, which is a nice one.
Right.
But any of the things you'd see about this broadside is it says at the bottom it was printed at a place called the Poet's Box. And the Poet's Box is something that is quite, it's not just specific to Dundee. Glasgow had one as well, but they're really, really interesting things. So the Poet's Box was a wee shop, and it was usually in the Overgate. And what would happen is the shop had a wee printing press in the back room, just operated by hand. And you could gang into the Poet's Box if you've got a song that you want to get printed. Presumably, just say a few words with the shopkeeper, convince them that it's a seller. You get a wee stack of these printed out, and the Poet's Box would have boxes full of songs. So as well as folk writing new ains, they would print off sort of traditional ballads, so like really old songs. They would print off Walter Scott, they would print off Robert Burns, and you could come in and just rifle through these boxes, and they really make a big deal of how many songs they've got. They've got catalogues saying, "Oh, we've got thousands and thousands of songs. You hate to come in, and you'll no believe it till you see it."
That sounds absolutely incredible. It puts me in mind sort of a mix of Groucho's on the Old Perth Road, where you can just gang in and hear rifle through all the CDs, but also like your wee cheap studios doing like sort of Blinchall Street and the old sort of mill part of Dundee, where local bands can just gang along and get themselves recorded for no much money, then try and punt their CDs round the pubs in that.
Aye, it's very much that sort of DIY spirit that I think you still really see that in Dundee's creative traditions today.
So, see with these broadsides, what sort of range are we seeing in terms of the creative output? Do you see a blend of kind sort of like high aspirational art fae folk around about here, or is it all kind of like funny stuff, your Dundee ABCs? What other kind of gear are we getting for this creative working class?
Aye, so the broadsides are there. It's not just funny songs. So there's a lot of disaster broadsides as well. So, for example, the Tay Bridge disaster, probably the worst sort of and the most well-known disaster to ever happened in Dundee. And there was so many broadsides kind of commemorating that, and they would be sort of very serious ones with black edges to sort of remember the deed way. And the broadsides, though, they're almost like they're like a wee pause between the oral tradition passing on, if you see what I mean. So a song will go for being performed onto a broadside, somebody will learn it off a broadside, and it'll gang away and get performed again. So they're quite like mobile, if you see what I mean, in that sense. They're like a helping hand for the oral tradition, and they kind of work really, really closely with that.
So did they emerge at that time, Ken Victorian Dundee, because it was such a time of muckle change where Abdi was suddenly moving about and traditions weren't being passed down as routinely as they had been for the last millennia? Was the Industrial Revolution one of the reasons this came to be?
Aye, so one of the reasons that we have a Poets Box in Dundee, I believe, is because we have the Irish connection here, and we had a lot of folk came over from Ireland to work in the mills during the 19th century. And the funny thing about the Poets Box shop, you see there's a Poets Box shop set up in Belfast in the 1840s. That's the earliest one I've ever found. And then you see them setting up in Dundee and in Glasgow as well. There was one in Edinburgh, but it didn't really tack off the same way in Edinburgh as it did in Dundee and Glasgow. And that I think the idea of having a broadside shop is something that Irish workers brought into Dundee with them. And I think whatever technology is available, folk will find a way of using it to tell their stories, to make art, to share art. So as soon as a printing press was something that you could have in the back of a shop, folk are going to do that and they're going to use it.
I love
So
it. I love it.
it's so exciting, just seeing all these sort of this melting pot of influences going in there.
That's fascinating. I hadn't kent that the Irish had brought that over with them. That's a fascinating insight. Let's hey a wee second for the folk at home to get a chance to lug into a wee clip, any of the sort of songs that was circulated through the Broadside Ballads. So this is just a wee cutty recording for Tober and Duchess, or the Kist o' Riches, that we've talked about a couple of times in these Blether Wi Heathers. So this is a clip for a song, and we'll hear it, and then Erin will give us a wee bit of background to it.
Oh, my name is Betsy Bell, in the Overgate I dwell, and nae doubt you'll wonder what I'm a doing here. But if you wait a wee, sure my tale I'll tell to thee. It's a tale nae doubt you'll think is very queer. For I'm looking for a lad, and he may be good or a bad. I'm going to take the first one that I see. He may be young or old, or a grey-headed friends or bald. It's only thing that wears the breeks for me. Oh, but the lads have had my share, sure I've had a score or more, but who they threw me up I dinna ken. For I'm neither prude nor shy, that the lads should pass me by. Oh, I wonder what's a do with all the men.
I mean, there's about 100 different things about that I love, and I'd like to ask you about all sorts of different things. The first thing, the thing we're doing here is kind of promoting the Scots language a wee bit. Are most of these broadsides, that was good braid Scots. Tell us about the Scots of these ballads.
Hi, so a lot of them, it's the broadsides are a great place for seeing. We could call it linguistic diversity, or we could call it folk no kenning how to spell or set type properly. So there's such a huge variation in what you see in the language of broadsides. And loads of them are in Scots that you see going around at this time. There's also going around in English. I believe you didn't see so many like Gaelic ones in Dundee, but I believe there are Gaelic broadsides out there. And basically, like I get the sense that a lot of them folk were just trying to get it printed as quickly as possible. And also the language, it's often not quite what you would say or sing if you were speaking or singing it. But it's almost like folk knew that it was just an aid to the memory. Like you could look at it and you'd maybe, remember how it actually goes just by kind of looking at the shape of the verses and seeing the key words there. So you get some sort of this lovely kind of awkward broadside style that some of them are written in.
So that song obviously was fairly, it was pretty sexy stuff. Is that something? is that kind of part of the vernacular tradition of the time? Because I think of Victorian Britain as being a fairly stuffy place. Maybe wrongly, I didn't care much about the period. But was the vernacular a place to escape for that, or was that a rare example?
I mean, the Victorians get an awfully bad press for being stuffy when even, throughout the society, it wasn't it wasn't really like it's been made it to be by previous generations. But that's a whole other podcast for a whole other time. And you do see like people are quite, they're a bit thoughtful about what they print. But there's certainly plenty of versions of Betsy Bell as a broadside for the 20th century, a wee bit later on. And there's no like, certainly in our collections at the library, there's no like super rude broadsides. But folk were absolutely singing and saying really rude things because that's what people do. But it does kind of look like folk were a wee bit cautious with what they would maybe print and share. Or somebody somewhere has a big muckle box of all the really, really rude broadsides and they've not donated them to the library. And if that's you, I would like to say we will absolutely take the rude stuff.
Well, let's put that out as a call for hands up for trad. If you hate vulgar ballads for 100 years ago or more, bring them to Erin at the local history section of Dundee Libraries.
Yeah.
So, any of the other things we're talking about, they broadsides are fascinating, and no doubt we could chat about them all night. I really love them. But there's another part to this story that I think is just as interesting. We're talking about these like almost self-published DIY, fairly punky feeling, like on the pavey broadsides. There was another strand to Victorian Scots language publishing in the town, was there? Can you tell us a bit about that?
Aye, so Dundee, you ken it as the city of jute jam and journalism. And the journalism part of that comes from the newspapers that were really coming into their own in Victorian Dundee. And this is kind of afore DC Thomson have taken over as the sort of chief publisher of newspapers. It was John Lang that sort of ruled the roost around here in Victorian times, and he published the People's Journal newspaper and the People's Friend magazine as well. And these were, as well as being sort of newspapers that would print the news, they were jam-packed with creative writing and poetry for the readers. So they actually had to start up the People's Friend, I think, because they were just getting so many poems and stories sent into the People's Journal that they could fit it all in. So they started a whole magazine that's still going strong today. There's a lot of Scots in the poetry that you're seeing appearing in these newspapers as well, but it's a bit more of a sort of formal Scots than what you're seeing on broadsides, and it's kind of, you see folk aiming to be part of a poetic tradition. Folk are always alluding to Burns and to Tannahill as sort of their twa greatest inspirations in these poems.
Mm-hmm. And somebody you're telling me about, we've got a photo of him here, is this boy with an incredible pipe, Tammy Bodkin or Tamis Bodkin. Now, that's an awfully wee picture, so trust me, he's got a funny wee pipe, almost touching his bonnet, and he looks like a laugh. Like he looks like a boy to go for a pint with. So tell us what his role in the whole thing is.
Aye, so this Tamis Bodkin is the alter ego of W.D. Latto, who was one of the editors with Lang at the newspapers. And he wrote this column, Tamis Bodkin, and it was from the point of view of Tamis, who was this Dundee tailor, and he wrote that column in Braid Scots. And Tamis and his wife Tibby were getting up to all sorts of adventures, and they would be like commenting on things that was happening about Dundee at the time. So they'd maybe, if there was a big event on, like a flower show or something, they'd maybe go to that and write a wee bit about Tamis Bodkin's day there. But there was also all sorts of adventures in the hame. Like there's one where Tibby ends up with a lobster just sort of clamped on her neb. And I can't mind how the lobster got in, if she was trying to eat it or if she was wanting to keep it as a pet, but it's this sort of wonderful, surreal kind of scenario.
I couldn't I couldn't believe the richness of this stuff. When you pointed it out to us, I went and had a wee look earlier on at some of Thomas Bodkin. Obviously, I grew up in a Scotland where seeing Scots in a newspaper wasn't really a thing. You'd hear Robbie Shepherd's column about Fairman in the Press and Journal, which is riveting in its own way, but it doesn't offer you the breadday life. And then you put us onto this, and Thomas has like a sort of 12-page article all about him gigging over to Paris and nobody able to order a proper breakfast in good grade Scots, which is totally uncomplicated. One of the things that some folk that write in Scots and put Scots out and about on social media and that get is a bit of negative feedback, because some folk cringe you a bit and say, you shouldn't be using Scots, you shouldn't be speaking like that. How was Thomas Bodkin and his tremendous articles received back in the 1800s?
Aye, well, most of the folk reading the People's Journal absolutely loved him. Like, he got stacks of fan mail, he got poems written in about how great he was. He was like, I don't know, a K-pop star or something of the day. But you did get the occasional grumpy person writing in about how that wasn't appropriate language to be reading in a newspaper. And the editorial stance was very much just, well, if you didn't like it, then you read that bit. And they were always on the side of Thomas Bodkin, which I think, that's quite refreshing as well, just to read a newspaper editor sort of just defending the Scots language. And there was one letter somebody the previous week had written in kind of complaining about this sort of vulgar language in the newspaper. And somebody else wrote in to kind of counter this person's, their complaint. And he's saying, what is he saying? Sorry.
No bother. I'll do like a sort of fill dance while you get ready.
I just, but he's saying it is apparent to everyone that these words would not have carried half the weight they did had they been written in pure English.
Nice.
There's a huge sense that the language is a really important part of the character of Thomas Bodkin.
Good stuff, good stuff. A bit of smedham around Scots. That's what you like to see.
Yeah, aye.
That's what we can learn. So the Victorians were sexier and more confident with their Scots. There's stuff to be learned from them. I should say, something I forgot to say at the top of the programme is that you watching at home can put your comments, whether you're watching on YouTube, Twitter or Facebook. If you comment underneath the video, you can interact with us. So I can see all the comments. They'll get pulled together by our software here. So I can see that Jamie or Jamie, good evening to you. I can see you're watching at home. James Barrowman is saying Stan Bodkin. So we've got a big Bodkin fan here. Maybe we can start a wee sort of Bodkin Appreciation Society.
I think we could have a Bodkin revival. You could get that pipe, Ali. You could pull that off.
Yeah, 100%. I could get the pipe. I could get the bonnet. I could just like rock about the... I didn't hate his talent, unfortunately. But maybe I could just plagiarise him really heavily and nobody will ken. So use at home. I'm going to be asking Erin at the end of this evening's broadcast for her favourite Scots phrase ahead of Giza Scots Phrase Day. Use watching can also give us your favourite Scots phrase. So let us ken, James, Jamie, whoever else is out there watching, let us ken your favourite phrases, anything you've heard, any Scots phrases you use all the time at work. Give us their context and put them in the comments and read them out. Erin, one of the things you've been doing for a good number of years now is a podcast which explores all sorts of different spheres of interest that I think will be interesting to our viewers this evening. You're winding up the Beans podcast. You've just put out your final episode, but the whole back catalogue sits online. So out of all the interesting stuff you've discussed over the years, what episodes would you direct our lovely viewers to have a look at?
I'm going to say, I'm guessing a few of our viewers are interested in language and the politics around language. So good 2-3 years ago now, we did an episode which is mostly about Gaelic, but it also touches on Scots as well, and sort of the role of these languages in Scotland, the new. So I would recommend going back through the annals and having a look on about hey, listen to that Ian. There's also one that's a wee bit more recent, and this is about, it's called Liberation Theology. And that is something that was totally new to me when my co-host Sam came up with this episode. And it's just a, really fascinating insight into ways of thinking about the world. And it gives you a good bit of hope, which I think we all need these days as well. So would recommend that one.
Good stuff. So Gaelic and liberation theology. I certainly didn't ken anything about it, so I'm going to download that for my walk the morn's morn. We hey, a mutual friend has got in touch in the comments. Good evening, Rachel. Rachel has a question for you. She's putting you on the spotlight, so I hope you can answer. Do you ken if William McGonagall, he's it for them that aren't fae Dundee, William McGonagall is this Ken Speckle terrible poet who I sort of immortalised in the city. Did he get in on the broadsheet action, or is he strictly a book/riot-inducing public readings kind of dude?
I'm glad you asked that question, and I hope you've all got a spare 3 hours while I talk about William McGonagall. So William McGonagall is so into broadside culture. We've got a good couple of folders of his original broadsides that he would get printed off. He had them a wee bit fancier. He did like to have a bit of a classy touch to his broadsides. And he would any event with a crowd, you'd find William McGonagall trying to sell his broadside about it. And I actually think McGonagall's poetry is a really great kind of illustration of the twa threads of Dundee writing, because he's got that kind of broadside oral tradition thing going on with his kind of scansion or lack of it. And he's got also that kind of high poetic register and attitude as well that he brings to it. So he's actually kind of meshing these two things together, and it kind of really, it just fails, but it's also kind of brilliant. And I certainly think he had a good bit of a clue what he was doing some of the time. But William McGonagall could only have existed in that context.
Smashing. That is smashing. We're nearly out of time, so we hate to rush on. We hate a great Scots phrase for James Barrowman. Thanks very much for it, James. We'll get to it in a wee second. Rachel, we ken you're tuning in. Cheers very much for that question. You also can give us a Scots phrase. Erin, we've got some gear to punt. You've got a book coming out in the no too distant future, which has these bonny wolves on the front cover. So tell us, lovely. Congratulations on getting published. Tell us about what the book's going to be.
Hi, and I'd like to shout out Catherine Suter for making these beautiful wolves. She's got a great page on Facebook and all, Catherine Suter Artist, so give her a look up. This is coming out as part of a series that the History Press has been doing over the past few years. And it's going around trying to get a collection of folktales for all the counties around sort of Scotland, England, Ireland. So mine is looking at what I like to think of as historic Forfarshire, so Angus and Dundee basically. It is full of kind of strange and weird and funny and dark things, and there's a good bit of devilry in there as well. I do love a wee devil story. So
that'll no doubt be when the Fifers come over to Angus, because we didn't have any devilry ourselves, but sometimes they sneak it in. And there's the wolves again. That sounds absolutely sensational. So just before we go to the phrases, just remind us of the title of it.
Angus Folktales.
Lovely. So
nice
look
and
out.
Angus coming out probably no wait till October, so get that in your diaries.
In time for Halloween, the perfect gift. So our James has gied us a cracking Scots phrase, and he's gied us, it's a sair fecht for a half loaf. A sair fecht for a half loaf. I love that phrase, James. That is a belter. That's one of the ones that you do hear all the time, and it's in you really feel when you're just scunnered at the end of a lang day. Sair fecht for a half loaf. Champion. Get yourself recording that on your phone, make a wee video it, stick it up on social media the morn's morn with the hashtag Giza Scots Phrase Day. And I'll make sure I retweet it, Hands Up for Trad will retweet it, and the world can get to ken that terrific phrase. We hear another in. Rachel says, thanks very much for your great answer, capital letters. Cheers, Erin, XX. Rachel Mackay's Scots phrase, ne tather ba. Lovely. Scots phrase, bit of a weird one. No sure if it's legit, but I use it all the time. Ne tather a ba. So that is the Dundonian phrase, ne bather ta, with the kind of spoonerism where you swap the consonants round. Rachel, big fan of it. Get yourself recorded that. Get it out the morn's morn. Hashtag Giza Scots Phrase Day, and we'll make sure and give a retweet. A compliment. Rory McDonald, wheeled in for putting together this Blether Wi Heather programme, fit a good way to see and lug into. Rory, cheers very much. I love all compliments, and that is well received. Also, Simon, the producer in the background. Erin, star of the show. It is your turn. Give us a Scots phrase.
The pressure. I was thinking, since we've been talking about storytelling, I like the phrase "Dinny fleg the bairns." And somebody used this as the title for a wee collection of Dundee ghost stories as well. So it's a lovely wee book. So if you ever see any of them kicking about, you should snap that up.
Great. Dinna fleg the bairns. I did hear that fleg's not as widely used around Scotland as I presumed it was. Because growing up in Angus, we'd use it all the time. I think you hear it in Aberdeen. But apparently it's not that widespread. Let us ken in the comments if fleg's used for your fae. And you did give us a couple. Have you got another one up your sleeve just as we're closing it out?
Oh, I can't think of one.
Nay bother. Erin, we are out of time.
All the Scots phrases have gone out of my brain.
It's no easy. It's no easy putting you on the spot like that. I appreciate it. But that's great. Dinny Flag the Bairns, which is also a collection of stories. No as good as Angus Folktales, out sometime in October, of course. Erin, I'll thank you. I'll mind Abdi at him to join in with hashtag Giza Scots Phrase Day. You'll see me and Erin and Rachel, hopefully Rory. We'll see James Nadeau putting his phrase online. There's going to be hundreds of folks and really interesting stuff.
Pressure for you there, James.
Heavy peer pressure on James, man. There's no getting away with it now. I've got your name written down. But guys, all I have to say is cheers very much for tuning in with these Blethers with Heather. We'll hit another series later in the year, Nadeau. Cheers very much to producer Simon Tumar for organising it all. Cheers to Hands Up for Trad for giving us this space to meet with great folk like Erin and hear their crack, which, as you'll agree, is a smashing way to spend a Thursday evening. Erin, thank you very much. And to Abdi Haim, good night.
Thanks for having me on, Ali, and thanks, Abdi, for your comments. It's been lovely seeing them popping up as we chat.
Love it.